Welcome to Focus on Gaza. I'm Imran Garda. Coming up on the program, we hear from the people who want to rebuild a broken Gaza. We ask an Israeli official why his government won't let cement cross the border. And we follow a father as he tries to get help for his homeless family. It's been a week of little respite for Gazans as Palestinian fighters fired rockets into southern Israel and Israel carried out more deadly airstrikes. Gazans were also pounded from above by the weather. Heavy storms muddied conditions for the thousands made homeless by the war. And $5 billion was pledged to rebuild those homes and the rest of Gaza's decimated infrastructure by the international community. The checkbooks have been opened to reconstruct the battered strip, but will the money get there? More than a month since Israel's 22-day offensive ended, Gazans are struggling to bring some normality back to their lives. Basic infrastructure and services like schools and hospitals will all need to be rebuilt. So there's no doubt that the reconstruction funds pledged this week will be welcome news in Gaza. But as our correspondent Todd Baer reports, it'll take more than promises to set the process in motion.
The story of Gaza's reconstruction effort more than 1 month after the war is that nothing is happening. The landscape shows a few people pitching in here and there, but the hammers are silent, the big equipment is idle, and thousands of desperate people are waiting. Civil engineer Majid Siam has the blueprints drawn up, a plan that will one day put all of the pieces back together.
When we build these buildings, we want to overcome it and build it according to our needs.
So much is destroyed here: homes, schools, government buildings. Figuring out where to begin is one of the biggest challenges.
Put the people before the politics now. It's about time.
John Ging, the UN's top official in Gaza, says rebuilding the education system is priority number one.
Because the children are the future. So we're standing here at the American International School. These institutions have to be rebuilt urgently. We want to develop the next generation to be equipped both in terms of their academic achievement and also in terms of their values and their mindsets and their outlook to contribute positively, not just to a future state of Palestine, but to the region and the world generally in a positive way. That's where we start.
Hamas government officials say more than 200 schools were partially damaged or destroyed in the war. The American school in Tawam, the Islamic University in Gaza City, and Sakhnin Elementary in Al-Tatra are among them. Reconstruction has not begun because a blockade imposed by the Israeli government as a sanction against Hamas is still in effect. The blockade is now preventing tons of reconstruction materials like concrete, steel, and glass from getting into the Gaza Strip. Donor nations from around the world pledged billions of dollars to fund the reconstruction effort at a conference in Egypt this week. But the money will sit in a bank account until or if the blockade is lifted. Several leaders have visited Gaza to see the destruction for themselves. A U.S. congressional delegation led by Senator John Kerry, a delegation from the EU led by Javier Solana, and most recently a visit by the top Middle East diplomat and former British Prime Minister Tony Blair. All of them called for the lifting of the blockade so reconstruction can begin.
So I hope and believe, as I've been saying for some time, that we can change this strategy, because a blockade of all of the Gazan people does not work.
The Israeli government says the blockade will not be lifted until a lasting ceasefire with Hamas is agreed to. But the prospects of this seem as distant as ever. Meanwhile, the only rebuilding being done here is the setting up of tents for people who lost their homes. Humanitarian aid worker Mark Pearson says it took 40 days for the tents to get in through Israel.
To me, spending 40 days just to try to get basic humanitarian aid into Gaza. It's been a long haul, and it's frustrating, but the patience, it's been a virtue to us.
For now, the reconstruction of Gaza is slowly happening with everyday people. Few tools, little money, and no organization.
Very angry. I want to make things. Every day I work here from 8 o'clock till 15, and now there's nothing to make. There's nothing.
And for people like Majid Siam, who have the skills, creativity, and determination to put Gaza back together, it is a game of waiting and wondering. Todd Baer, Al Jazeera, Gaza City.
Well, with us from Jerusalem to talk about who, if anyone, will profit from rebuilding Gaza is our reporter Mike Hanna. Mike, who stands to gain?
Well, Imran, the very important thing to understand is that although these pledges are made in financial terms, that is, that they are mentioned in terms of dollars or of euros, the bulk of this assistance comes in the form of projects. Defined projects which have been submitted to the donor nations and donor entities, such as schools, buildings, civil service units, all this type of thing. The donor nation then decides which project it is going to fund, and then it does so under its supervision. Once again, many of the donor entities will, as they have done in the past, channel the funds for such projects through recognized channels such as the United Nations or the World Bank. Now, this is for the bulk of that assistance. There is also some money that has been pledged for what are called budgetary considerations. Now, to understand this, and this is in fact a cash payout, to understand this, for example, the United States has pledged $900 million. 400 million of this has been earmarked for projects in the West Bank. 200 million has been earmarked for development projects and reconstruction in Gaza. And then there's a sum that has been assigned to budgetary considerations to balance the Palestinian Authority's budgetary shortfall. Now, once again, what must be understood is that this money is given not to factions. It is given to the governing entity, which is the Palestinian Authority. Now, that budgetary money, for example, will be used in part to fund the 75,000 civil servants in Gaza who are still being paid by the Palestinian Authority. So in terms of who profits from this, well, on the ground, obviously, there will be greater employment for Palestinians. Certainly, there will be companies that are contracted in to conduct these projects, but everything will be supervised by the donor entity and also administered through a recognized channel such as the World Bank or the United Nations. But all of this argument is moot while the blockade of an entity like Gaza continues, Imran.
Yes, exactly. I mean, all of this is quite abstract. That money can do nothing while the blockade continues. Israel says that until it has a long-term ceasefire with Hamas, the blockade won't end. Are we any closer to that?
Well, what we have here is the complication that comes out of the way the situation is defined. Hamas, to all intents and purposes, does control Gaza. However, it was completely excluded from the reconstruction conference, and all the pledges have been made to the Palestinian Authority as the governing entity of the Palestinian territories. Now, the issue of Israel's antipathy and conflict with Hamas is actually separate from the question of reconstruction. And one must mention as well is that where we do have a situation where there is some profit accrued, Israel controls the flow of traffic from its side into Gaza. It does charge port fees, lading fees at each entry point, amounts to some $1,000 a truck. So once again, as Egypt would do from its side. So there are many questions to this, but the point simply remains there can be no reconstruction while there is a blockade in place, Imran.
Mike Hanna, thanks ever so much for that. Well, earlier I spoke to Abdulaziz Al-Rukban, the special humanitarian envoy for the UN Secretary General and the first Arab humanitarian envoy, fresh from his tour of Gaza to assess the most pressing needs. Abdulaziz Al-Rukban, thank you very much for agreeing to talk to us on Focus on Gaza. You've just returned from a fact-finding mission in Gaza. It can't have been a pleasant sight. What did you see and what did you find out?
Well, thank you very much. I saw a lot of the donations now got stuck. Example in Al Arish, we have it's about closer to 12,000 metric ton of foods and goods donated from Middle East countries and a special GCC country and got stuck there. They have the borders working for 2.5 days in a week. This is not enough time to get those goods going there. And plus on that, the rules they put in, it's very tough rules to get the goods. 80% of the Gaza population now independent in the UN's agencies helping them. They don't want anybody feed them. They need us to help them to have a job, to work there. I mean, that's what I see it in Gaza. They don't want you hand them foods. They want you to help them. For the farmer example, he want to get in his farm and he want to work. That's what we are after, to have those people, to have them jobs, they can stand up and take care of them families.
Around $5 billion was pledged at the Sharm el-Sheikh Donors Conference. It's an extraordinary amount of money. The question is, will it actually reach the Palestinian people?
One of the UN agencies, they said it's not the money. One of them, they said, I have a $200 million. I cannot use it because I cannot get material across the border. I'm talking about houses, school, hospitals. I need material for that. I think money is no good. It should be open the borders with no conditions.
So Israel has security concerns. Is there anything you can say to them or do for them that will reassure them that your aid is purely for humanitarian purposes and won't be usurped by any of the groups within Gaza?
We're not rebuilding bunkers. I mean, houses for the people. That's how I will assure them. Anything that comes through the UN agencies, we are in control of it. And if they can open that border for us, I think it will be great.
Aziz Rukban, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir.
Well, after the break, we'll be asking Major Peter Lerner, Israeli Defense Ministry spokesperson, if the blockade makes a mockery of the reconstruction effort.